I want to start here in just kind of a conversation. I wrote down, in fact, it's not on my typed out notes, but I wrote down, just look them in the eye. and them is you. This has been such an interesting series all the way back to the beginning of 1 Samuel and the different characters that come to play. We were talking about Saul last week. This week and the next week, and then we stop and we kind of save the very last few chapters for another time. But this is the last part that really is a emphasis this week and next week on the person of David. And I think I've said this before in this series. If you take Saul and you take David, I mean, obviously their lives are entwined through a whole lot of different things that happen. But there's a lot of things that start off the same about both of those guys. They're warriors. They have God's backing and support. God's favor, as Pastor Raphael was, is with Saul, and it's also with David. And then there's things that begin to turn into different directions for each of those guys. And they respond differently as time goes on. David is quite a bit younger than Saul. And so we kind of see him deal with some of the things that Saul deals with later in life. But for our purposes today, I want us to, I said last week, you know, I feel like Saul is one of my friends. And I guess I need to give equal time to David. If Saul is one of my friends, then David needs to be one of my friends too. And so we watched him work through stuff. And in 2 Samuel, he works through a whole lot of different issues that come to play in his life there too. But the phrase that surrounds David's life, that's used throughout the church and by writers, is he was a man after what? God's own heart. But notice the terms there. He was a man after God's own heart. You could maybe put the word pursuance, in pursuance of there, right? Which means that he didn't always have it. Right? And I want to embrace, you know, that part of who he is as we see some things moving, even the songs, Seeing the Victory, that we're going to repeat here in a few minutes, and it will relate. You'll see it. Maybe you didn't when we sang it earlier in the service, but you'll see how it really relates well. It talks about giants to the story of David. But he was in pursuance of God's heart. I want to pause right there and ask you this question, or he was a man after God's own heart. And I put this in the context of the story of Saul the other day. But what is it that you are in pursuance of? What are you chasing after? With how you live your life? To kind of step into those shoes as we work through this process of looking at David now, this week and next week, and then, like I said, we pause and it shifts back to Saul at the end of 1 Samuel. But this book, 1 Samuel, is just full of such incredible drama. We have David at front and center this week. David who will be, and we all know this, but I just have this idea at this point in his mind. He's not really so sure, but we know that one day he will be the king of Israel. Maybe grab that for a second. Like I said, if we're trying to relate to David and trying to figure out how he's processing different things, and I'm going to beat on this drum a little bit more, well, quite a bit more as we move through this, but what is it that has been put in front of you that you are in pursuance of, and even that God has said, this is where I want to take you? But wherever you are today, it doesn't feel like you're getting there. Can anybody relate to that? So we're looking at David, who will be but is not yet king of Israel. David, who fled from the anger of Saul, leaving his best friend Jonathan, you remember this, standing in a field because Jonathan has just given him the bad news about his dad. And so David just kind of, they share this moment together of mutual support, and then David runs off. David, who has left his homeland, I think at that point, really just wanting to escape and be alone. But that's not what happens. He runs off, and in a short amount of time, there's a few other supporters, soldiers that are trudging along behind him, some friends, or with him. And then that number of a few grows to 20 or 40 or 50, and then to a few hundred, right? And then we get to the place where we are today, and this David is now followed by 600 soldiers and their families. Same David who has had 2 opportunities to kill Saul, right? Nod your head if you remember that part of the story. He's had 2. One of them was when David and I'm guessing a whole bunch of his soldiers were hiding in this cave. Saul's army is in pursuance of David because Saul wants to kill him. And Saul excuses himself and not knowingly goes into the same cave that David is hiding out in to relieve himself. And while he's standing in the shadows of that cave, David sneaks up, you remember this? And he cuts a piece of the fabric off of Saul's garment. And then communicates back to him later, hey, I got a piece of your cloak. Take a look. There's a chunk missing. I could have killed you. And I didn't. And then later on, he has another chance. Saul is sleeping. And David sneaks down, and this time he doesn't cut a piece of fabric, but while Saul is asleep, he grabs his spear and his water jug. That spear thing, that's kind of Saul's crutch, because he wants to use that every time he can, not just as a crutch, but as a skewer. And so when Saul wakes up and he can't find those things, a voice shouts across the canyon and says, hey! I could have killed you. But if you notice, your water jug and your spear are missing. I just took those. I left you alive. David, who is in this very awkward season of his life, has now, and he gives those items back. I should say that. Obviously doesn't kill Saul then. But now he has sold off kind of his services as a mercenary, or in fact what Achish says is his own personal bodyguard. He sells off his services to Achish, this Philistine lord, this Philistine commander. And so now the gonna-be king of Israel is serving under the leader of the Philistines. And he is just about, at this point in the story, ready to go to war with his own people. David in the ranks with the Philistines, marching to battle against the nation of Israel. Now things are going to get better for David. And here's the cool part, because we've been journeying through this whole thing the last several weeks on Saul, and it's been, I feel like I'm dragging every time until I get to something that I can grab hold of that I feel good about God doing in this storyline. Today is kind of the beginning of God working through David, but here's the interesting part. David really doesn't even see it. That's why the title this morning is Protected from Our Own Ignorance. How many would just jump and give testimony? I have been protected from my own ignorance numerous times. That's not one of the testimonies we usually get on Sunday morning. Yes, it's me. I'm so stupid. And God loves me anyway. And He takes care of me. Okay, how many would not necessarily give that testimony, but raise your hand if you would say, I know it's true. Okay. Okay, I'm going to get even more specific here, so things are going to get better for David, but he really doesn't even see it in this portion of Scripture in 1 Samuel 29. But it's the beginning. And I wrote down here, I thought, well, this is such a strange thing. And then I thought, maybe it's not. So here's a question, another question for us today, and those who are following along. At the beginning, getting into the storyline here, are there things that you know of that God intervened in your life and spared you a consequence of your actions? Raise your hand. You know this. Okay, some of you didn't raise your hand. So you are very different than me. Maybe he put an advocate into your personal storyline. And you were like, man, that person stood up for me. I did not expect that. That's so amazing. Maybe he somehow circumvented a natural occurrence. In other words, you ignorantly set something in motion, but God, through some resource, personnel-wise, or some kind of, I don't know, legislative body in some capacity, somehow God spared you the consequence of something that you had put in motion. That's happened to me. Maybe this is a better question, though. I mean, there are those moments in time where we can say, yeah, I know it was coming to me. I earned it. What I did was going to have this kind of, I was about ready to reap what I had sown, right? And then somehow God stepped in and spared me. Praise the Lord. But maybe this is a better question. Do you believe that there are times that happened and you not only didn't know that you had created the mess, but you didn't know then for sure that God had taken care of it? Do you believe that happened? If you're not raising your hand now, rather either in your heart or in your mind, I just want to challenge you and say, look, I don't know your life, but I know my life well enough just again to say, I believe that the number of times that I was aware that God stepped in for me is minuscule in comparison to the amount of times he stepped in and I had no idea. Amen? So here's the question that goes with that one maybe. Do you know why he does that? And this is the simple, very theological answer. Because he loves you. Because he loves you. He steps in times and saves us from ourselves or from the calamity that someone else has inflicted into our lives, and we see it sometimes. And he does that because he loves you. And then he also steps in moments that you have no idea. And he never tells you. I mean, when we get to heaven, you can ask him that question. I feel like I want to. I want to know at least some of the answer to that one. Could you tell me just a couple of the times? Because I don't want to know all of them, because I was stupid a lot. But could you tell me a couple of the times where you spared me some significant things and I didn't even know? And I think he'll answer that, if I even care about such things when I get to talk to him. But he does that because he loves us. He does that for individuals. He does that for us. He does that for individuals in the Bible. He does that for whole nations of people. I think sometimes we say this phrase in the church sometimes, and I know I'm taking way more on the introduction here than I intended to, but we say things like this: that is for God's glory, as if God needed to have us go, you are amazing. I mean, the reality is that statement helps us. It's not like if we puff him up enough, if we flatter God enough, then he's going to be nicer to us. Or he has such bad self-esteem. He doesn't even tell us all the abundance of times that he takes care of us. He wants us to glorify him because we need to put him in that place of God and honor him and serve him as if we're people after his heart. Because then the message of who he is gets out. But it's not about us flattering. I mean, I think sometimes we get confused with that. We don't really say it out loud. But it's like if we flatter him enough, he might do some cool things. God doesn't need our flattery. He just wants our heart. Individually, corporately, as a nation, on the earth. Okay, that was the introduction. So this is one of those moments for David. Look in your Bible, I said 1 Samuel chapter 29, verses 1 through 11. We're not going to read all of it in one chunk. You're just going to follow around as we move through it. So starting with verse 1, watch what happens with David here in this story. And this kind of comes under, we begin with when blending in is a bad plan in your outline. When blending in is a bad plan. Verse 1, chapter 29 of 1 Samuel. The Philistines gathered all of their forces at Aphek, and Israel camped by the spring in Jezreel. As the Philistine rulers marched with their units of hundreds and thousands, you can kind of see this procession in your mind. And then David and his men were marching at the rear with Achish. And the commanders of the Philistines asked, "What about these Hebrews?" And Achish replied, "Is this not David, who is an officer of Saul, the king of Israel? He has already been with me for over a year, and from the day that he left Saul until now, I have found no fault in him." Have you ever been told by somebody, well, let me say this about what we just read real quick. So you can see the procession of the Philistine army, said hundreds and thousands and different ranking commanders and horseback and camels, I assume too, and foot soldiers, and they're all marching along, getting ready to meet Saul on the battlefield. And in earlier chapters, we saw it's a giant army. Because from a mountaintop, like 8 to 10 miles away, Saul could see this huge mass of an army. And now they're marching to meet Saul. And all the way at the back is David. And so some of the Philistine commanders then come to Achish, who has kind of been his cohort here. And they go, "What are we doing with this guy? What are we doing with those Hebrews that are with us, who have kind of tried to blend in?" Have you ever been told by anybody, "Hey, look, it's going to be fine. All you got to do is blend in"? Anybody? Yeah? Or maybe just thought to yourself, "Look, if I just blend in, they'll not even know that I'm here." Right? There's sometimes when that's a good thing. I was thinking about that this week. Just like if you're in the middle of traffic on I-5 around 5 o'clock going any direction, I think it's a good plan to blend in or get off the freeway. Don't try to do your own thing. I had somebody who did that one time. They did their own thing right into the rear of my truck, and then they did their own thing went outside the traffic and took off, and I had to pay to get their own thing fixed. It's good if you're in a marching band to blend in, right? That's my marching band impression. I don't know what instrument that was either, but it's good to blend in if you're in a marching band or a symphony, right? Or a worship team. Blending is good, unless you've been told you're supposed to have a solo. Don't have one. You know, there's no space. You go to a symphony, and there's no space that somebody can just step up and have a violin solo unless it's part of the program where everybody's going to go yay. And it's not even going to work well on our worship team. Whether it's vocally or instrumentally, we do get a chance to hear some kind of solo pieces here and then, but that is determined and put in. It's part of the plan. So staying to the script, playing your role, following the leader, that is a good thing to do. But in this case, blending into the Philistine army is not the place for the gonna-be king of Israel. Right? Because where is it going? The army is headed to fight his own people. So blending in is not a good plan. The truth is there are situations or points in time when true leaders, and I don't know if you see yourself in this role, but I would say this, just every one of us at some point in our life will be called to be a leader in some capacity. It might just be a leader in a particular conversation on a given day. It might be a position that you were asked to lead or to in a work environment. It might be in a school environment. To be a leader. And at that point, it's not the right thing to blend in. Amen? I could spend a lot of time here. The thing is if you're a leader, you're the one who's supposed to look to the horizon. You're the one who's supposed to spell out what's coming next. You're not just supposed to be the person riding behind, the old expression where, in following, where you're looking straight at the south end of a northbound donkey. If you've been asked to lead, that's not where you belong. And I said this about Saul last week. I said, the problem with Saul is he never deals with his stuff. And so he's got Samuel around as kind of his good luck charm, his rabbit's foot. That's what I said. And so whenever he is in this difficult situation because he hasn't done what he's supposed to do in obedience to God, he reaches out to Samuel. Even last week as a ghost, he reaches out to Samuel. David is in a place that is not like David. Like I said, he's at the very back with Achish, and he's following a group of people that are going to war with his own kin. We're going to look at this more later, but like I said, if you are meant to be a leader, and I know that I'm talking to somebody right now, like I said, leader doesn't mean that you're in an elected position. Leader can mean that within the framework of a conversation that takes place between four people, you're the one that's supposed to look to the horizon and say, here's what's coming. And to step out from the rear and acknowledge that. So it could be at your place of work, it could be at school, it could be in your home. You're the one that's supposed to step forward and say, look, this is a bad plan for us. We've been blending in with how we use our finance, with how we use our free time. We can't do that anymore. It's not good for us. And so you have to step forward because you're responsible, and you're realizing that right now as I'm saying it. You are responsible for setting a tone, and that doesn't mean you clear the decks and you shout and you scream. Leaders don't necessarily have to do that. They just have to step into the role that they're supposed to have and begin to help draw people together to go to the place that I have no idea why God put on our church to host that meeting on September 19th, that God began to put that on my heart a couple years ago. But here's what I do know. As I reached out to the mayor, as I reached out to the police chief and the other people, one at a time, significant people said, yes, I'll come. They have, some of those people are friends and folks that I've talked to a handful of times. But there's no reason based on any position that I have that they would come and be here. 12 leaders in our area who will be here that Saturday And the only reason I can give you that I felt like I was supposed to do that is exactly what we're talking about here. I just felt like this is something and I didn't ask for your permission, but we as Hillside Church are supposed to do because our nation needs hope and healing. And our community needs hope and healing. And somebody needs to make an avenue for that dialogue to take place. So that was part of my thing with this. What is yours? You know that you are responsible for setting a tone. It's your time. You may need to step out of the procession. Excuse yourself. Like I said, it doesn't mean you got to shout at anybody. You just go, excuse me, this isn't where I belong. I've got to step over here or over there. Even, folks, even if you're not sure where you're supposed to go yet, all you do know is you're not supposed to blend in anymore. Excuse me. I got to get out of that direction. And then trust that God will take you beyond that. Because sometimes blending in is not where God wants you. Staying there is bad, and it's bad not just for you, but also for those who you have been called to lead. In this case, in our storyline, verses 4 and 5, it's so bad, even the enemy knows it. Even the enemy. Read verses 4 and 5 with me. The Philistine commanders were angry with Achish, and they said, send that man back, that he may return to the place that you assigned him. He must not go with us into battle, or he will turn against us during the fighting. How better could he regain his master's favor than by taking the heads of our own men? Isn't this the David that they sang about in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands, and David has slain his tens of thousands. Just a couple quick thoughts here. Number one, they make an assumption that doesn't even live right now in David about his loyalty to Saul and to his faith. Isn't this who David is? David has kind of forgotten who David is. But the enemy remembers. In the middle of the battle, he will turn against us. In other words, when push comes to shove, he will return to that true north of his life, spiritually speaking. And he will come against us. Second thought is this, that I thought was just interesting, and there's nothing special about saying this, but isn't it crazy that the enemy knew the songs of the saved? Isn't this the guy they've been singing songs about in the nation of Israel? Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. The fact that they could quote the lyrics. I just think that's so amazing. That must have been some song. They didn't play it just on Christian radio. It was a crossover song. So what does this all mean? That the enemy gets it and stuff. Step back to verse 3 for a moment. Just before we got there, the question that comes out is, well, what about these Hebrews? See, Hebrews wasn't just a statement of their geographical background. I did some research here, and I want to share this with you. The word for Hebrew, back up. The first person to be called a Hebrew was Abraham. And the name commonly refers to his descendants, known as the Jewish people. Rabbi Yehuda taught the word ever means opposite side. So Abraham believed in one God. Ever is kind of how that word is pronounced, Hebrew, at least from the information I got from this commentary. Abraham believed in one God, and the rest of the world worshipped man-made gods. Thus, Abraham stood on one side, and the entire world stood on the other side. So Hebrew means the one who is opposed, on the other side, different from all others. Abraham was a solitary believer in a sea of idolatry. Perhaps this is why the second person to be called a Hebrew is Joseph. A nice Hebrew boy ends up in Egypt, the decadent land of the pharaohs, where people in celestial spheres are worshipped instead of God. A lone teenager with outlandish Hebrew beliefs from the far side the strongest society of his day. Joseph did not cave in to the pressures. He stood firm in the faith of his ancestors and ultimately rose to the top of Egyptian society until he was second to Pharaoh himself. In fact, it was the wife of Potiphar who had tried to tempt him into sinning, and he withstood the temptations that he is first referred to. It's in that moment as Hebrew. And then he showed that he was a faithful bearer of the contrary tradition of Adam, Noah, Shem, Eber, and Abraham. So when they said, what about those Hebrews? It wasn't just about like those people that are a part of this nation. It was about these people who are against us, both in how they live and in their faith. These people who are on the other side. And that's why they're making a statement here that says they can't blend into us. They can't be with us. Even his enemies are understanding there is something I'm concerned about here. The people around us, now I want to take this and kind of turn this sideways for a second. The people around us, folks who either we or even they see us as on the other side. We're not called Hebrews. But within our faith as Christ followers, the people that we see on that other side or they see us, God will sometimes, and we see this in this story, use them to protect us. God has surrounded us, even in the enemy camp, so to speak, with people who he will use to protect us. You're going, how does that work? When we moved to Chicago, my wife and I, we worked in a boys' club there. There were a mess of people there that we were really good friends, that we're still really good friends with, but we didn't share faith with. When I say share faith, we didn't go to church with them. And yet they protected us. Rhonda will tell you, if she was standing here and the weather's kind of played havoc with her body this week, and so she's not here, but she would tell you there were kids from that Boys and Girls Club that every time she left the Boys and Girls Club, because it was in an area where there was a lot of gang stuff that was happening, they would walk with her and tell her, don't go down there, let's go this way because this is safer. When we were in Kenya, there were people who helped us, fundis. Fundi is somebody who specializes in a particular type of work, right? So you can be a fundi in a whole bunch of different ways, but it's an expert, somebody who's trained and experienced in some kind of work. And so it didn't matter what we were working on. There were fundis that helped us with our vehicles. Fundis that were our guides through Kibera. Fundis that helped us know where to go into the industrial area in Nairobi that was very busy and chaotic, and we would have probably never found who we were looking for if they hadn't come along with us and given us guidance and direction. We had a Muslim friend in Kenya who helped us to buy a vehicle and navigate some of the issues with the Nairobi City Council at one point where the church was trying to work on but the point is just this, Chicago, Kenya, Bulgaria, Poland, there were people who God put there that weren't even in our faith family. But God used them to protect us and also to remind us of who we were. People who watched out for us because they respected us, which brings us to the next and final portion of this morning, where there's instruction from the adversary. It depends on how you look at this. You know, sometimes you can title something one way and then title it a different. It just depends on your perspective. So it's either instruction from the adversary or the grace of God at work. Or maybe it's the both at the same time. So verse 6, Achish called David and said to him, "As surely as the Lord lives, you have been reliable, and I would be pleased to have you serve with me in the army. From the day that you came to me until today," now these words are like I said, directed from Achish, the Philistine warrior leader, to David. "From that day you came to me until today, I have found no fault in you, but the rulers don't approve of you. So turn back and go in peace. Do nothing to displease the Philistine rulers. Verse 8. It's so interesting because David can't even help himself here. But what have I done? He's like begging to stay involved with where the army's headed. What have I done? What have you found against your servant from that day I came to you until now? Why can't I go fight against the enemies of the Lord the King? Really? David? You've spared Saul's life twice, but you're ready to jump on your horse and go to battle against your own people and against the king. The times where he spares his life, he says, I can't lift a hand against the Lord's anointed. Remember that? But for whatever reason, right here, he's ready to go. And Achish answered, I know that you have been as pleasing in my eyes and as an angel of God. It's interesting here, too. In the original Hebrew of this portion of Scripture, Achish uses the right names of God. When he says, as surely as the Lord lives, you have been reliable, the actual word there is Yahweh. He doesn't just use some frivolous term. He actually uses the Hebrew language to describe. And then when you get down to the other verse there, verse 9, it says, I know you have been as pleasing in my eyes and as an angel of God. The word there is Elohim. So the enemy is quoting the name of God to David. Nevertheless, the Philistine commanders have said, he must not go up with us into battle. So get up early, along with your master's servants who have come with you, and leave in the morning as soon as it's light. Verse 11, where we finish here for today. So David and his men got up early in the morning to go back to the land of the Philistines where they had camped out. And the Philistines went up to Yezreel to fight with Saul. So let's summarize this whole thing here in just a couple quick minutes. The first idea is this. Remember that God works at times. Well, at all times, God is working. Amen? At all times, in your life, in my life, God is at work. He doesn't take days off. And he doesn't say, gee, I hope things go well for you today. I've got more pressing things. He is at all times working in your life. And I'll go back to that question I asked earlier today. Why? Because let's say it together, because he loves me. Because he loves me, he's working at all times. But oftentimes, in fact, probably most of the time, it's without our permission. He doesn't check in and go, hey, I was thinking about doing this today. How are you with that? Most likely, he just puts you into a position or invites someone else into your life story, trusting that we are people after his heart, believing that the outcome will work out. Well, not just believing, knowing that whatever the outcome comes as part of his plan. So oftentimes, he works without our permission. Secondly, he works without our understanding of the good in the moment. There's going to be a ton of times that things happen in your life and we're like, I thought all things work together for the good that love God. And the reality, that's the truth. Amen? But here's the truth that stands next to that. You won't always see the good at that moment. Amen? Which means you have to trust. You can't see how things are working together. I had a thought a while back, and I just, I think I may have even said something about this. Spring comes, and all these things are set in motion, right? Spring comes, and flowers come up, and the grass, all of a sudden, it just begins to turn from green, or from brown to green, and hostas, is that how you say that? Or hostas? I've heard it both ways. Hostas, okay. Thank you, John. All of a sudden, there's this plant that comes out, and you know that with any kind of plant. The daffodils, And what are the other ones that are the first ones? Tulips. And what else? Crocuses. They all come like somebody knows that that's supposed to happen. Did you design it that way? Not you. And there's a part of me that it's like, you go to bed and then you come out and there it is. And I've thought to myself, I want to just watch and see it, right? Has anybody ever done that? Have you ever stood somewhere and watched something? And then, there it is. I don't see anybody saying yeah. But we know it happens because we go to bed and we come back and there it is. That's how God is doing things in our lives and in the world. It's happening. It's changing. Something is happening even when it seems like nothing is happening. Amen? And you have to trust that. The last thing. God works at times without our seeing the end purposes while on earth. He brings individual purposes together in ways and in timing that is way beyond our understandings. So he does stuff without our permission, without our understanding the good in the moment, without our seeing the end purposes while here on earth, but always with our best in mind. Because why? Because he loves us. Because he loves us. We have to remember at that point it's not just our best, my best, or your best, but it's our best, right? And it's not just our best, it's our best, right? So here's the last thing here. The last point of this whole idea as we look at David and we can see God sparing him this horrendous outcome of him fighting against his own people as it relates to his story. And this is an idea I've borrowed from Rick Warren from a long, long time ago. Don't forget or doubt in the dark what God has shown you in the light. The perfect representation of that in David's life, and if you can play just a little bit here, we're just about done. But the perfect representation of that goes all the way back to 1 Samuel chapter 16, starting with verse 10. It says, Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, the Lord has not chosen these. And so he asked Jesse, are these all the sons that you have? Well, they're still the youngest, Jesse answered, but he is tending the sheep. Samuel said, send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives. And so he sent and had him brought in, and he was ruddy, with a fine appearance and handsome features. And then the Lord said, rise and anoint him. He is the one. So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came upon David in power. 1 Samuel 16:13. He's like 10 years old then. David's 10. It's after that as a teenager, he faces off against Goliath. And at this point in the story, well, in fact, what we know is that he doesn't become king until he's 30-ish. So from that anointing, as the boy who wasn't even present in the meeting, but is anointed to lead 20 years and a lot of life and a lot of cruddy stuff takes place, right? I'm going to ask you to stand. Here's a phrase that I felt like the Lord gave me. Sometimes there's a lot of life between consecration and completion. A commitment that you have made to Him, or He has made to you, or that you have made together with God, sometimes there is a lot of life between consecration and completion. 20 years is a long time to be thinking about stuff. And why isn't it working this way? My question is, can you wait that long in your life? And alongside that question, how will you live in between? Because most likely, all of us are in between something. Right now, you're in between a consecration and a completion of what that is all about. And you're living there right now. And it's not easy. Don't go back and blend in too long that you miss what it is you're supposed to be doing. Maybe, like I said, right now you don't know exactly what that is, but you just know you're supposed to step out. You can't see exactly what it is, but you know that there's something coming because of that consecration. You can't quite see it or even feel it right now. Because it's beyond the horizon of the horizon of the horizon of the horizon of the horizon. Okay? It's out there. You can't see it. But like we started today, that consecration is coming to a completion. There is a victory. Is a victory for you. It maybe won't make the news or television, but there is a victory for you that is coming. It's right now it's a hymn in your heart. It's the melody line being played behind me. It speaks of what's coming. If you just stay where you need to stay or move to where you need to move. There's a chorus of His faithfulness that is coming to your life because He never fails in being faithful to whatever He has asked you to do or promised will happen. We're going to see a victory. Stay the course.
Let's just declare these few lines together. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. Come on, sing it again. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. Sing it again. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. Turn it for good. You turn it for good. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. time. You take what the enemy meant. Yeah. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it. Come on, lift your voice and sing it. You take. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. One more time. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. Turn it for good.
Would you just bow your head with me for a second? Lord, I thank you for all of this that's attached to this idea that you are at work when we cannot see that you are at work, and even when we are apathetic at best to what you're trying to achieve, or completely in the wrong line. You will shape us in those moments and teach us things and show us things that will help us in the end. But Lord, we just ask right now that as a people who will say, we are yours, and my heart is for you, and we are open to where you want to lead. I just ask, Lord, that you would encourage those who today came here, and maybe as I was speaking, they were thinking to themselves, you know what, I have so long forgotten the story of my life that God was using, and I have stepped away, and I've just kind of blended in, and it's been very comfortable there. The temperature is always just right. But I'm not leaning into anything. I'm not looking at the horizon. I've just gotten comfortable. I have no personal sense of mission. Like I said, the story of my life came to somebody pushed pause. And it just stayed there. Lord, I just pray that if there's anybody who's here or who's listening online, and that is where they're at right now, that you would speak words of encouragement and say, I have been watching. I have been saving you from things you didn't even know. I've not turned my back on you because I love you. I love you. Someone has to hear that today in a fresh voice from Jesus and from His Spirit. And I just pray, Lord, you use whatever way you need to speak that to whomever needs to hear it. And for those who are just weary today, because it's been 20 years, they're not apathetic, they're just tired. Or any other reason why they've stepped out of the trek that you have, I just pray that you rejuvenate them as well. And if there's somebody who today has never even heard of this concept, who's watching online or is maybe here in the service too, that is like, what? God wants to use me to do what He's doing in the world? Lord, just reveal to them, yes. For such a reason as this, we are in this season, and for such a reason as this, we were conceived. We were brought to life. to share in what you're doing. Speak that to somebody this morning too, I pray, Jesus, in your wonderful name. Amen. Amen. Thank you for coming.
I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory for the battle.